Good morning once again, and thank you for staying tuned to Sunrise at Sea here on CTV. Today is the 26th of July 2022, and by the way, if you're in Kampala, then you know that it's a chilly morning. It's actually raining heavily, so make it a point to stay warm. What you can do is carry yourself a cardigan. If you love some coffee, some tea, or even some warm water, it can actually come in handy and be of help to you. Welcome to Our Views, and this is a segment where we talk about real-life conversations. Today, the ladies and I are going to be deliberating on the matter in regard to asking for advice. I think it was yesterday when I talked about no man is an island. You know, sometimes you cannot know it all. You need some insight from friends. You need some insight, and also seeking professional advice is very important, especially if you can afford it. I think there's one of us who usually talks about going for therapy sessions or, finding a therapist. Yes, they do come with a cost, but there's nothing as good as getting professional advice, because it's easier to actually trust professional advice than, trusting your friend's advice. Sometimes you're very skeptical about, did they actually give me the right advice? Did they give me the wrong advice? And actually, advice comes in two forms, good and bad advice. But we'll be deep diving into that conversation later on, and the ladies will definitely, give us their opinions. And what you can do is connect with us on our social media platforms, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at CTV Uganda. Let us know, what do you think about seeking advice? Are you the kind of person that loves to seek advice, to get other people's opinions? Or do you believe that you're an island? Yes, you're an island, that you have it all. I mean, you always figure things out on your own. Joining me today are the ladies, Shivan Auma and Priva Elivas. Good morning, ladies.
Good morning.
It's a chilly morning. How do you feel?
We are single.
Oh, what about being single?
Okay, I want a sweater. Do you want to buy it for me?
You're even wearing a jacket already. I'm not even wearing one.
This is an office jacket. I said a sweater.
A sweater.
Yes.
If there is a well-wisher out there who could actually bring Shivan a sweater, it would be very much appreciated.
I love the cold weather because people in Buwate, the areas of Kasangati, their roads,
The dust
is going to come down.
The dust is down, but there is mud.
So
there is that as well.
Oh, but at least it reduces on the dust. The dust is way too much, so win-win situation, honestly. It's okay. It's well. We haven't had rain in a long time.
We wish you well. And with the potholes in Kampala, it doesn't matter whether you're from Buwate. I mean, it's always flooding around Lugogo bypass whenever it rains. So yes, it looks like we won't be escaping it anytime soon. Whether you have a car, whether you're in a border, whether you're in a taxi, we are in Uganda and we are living in it. So let's talk about advice. First of all, seeking advice involves asking another person what course of action he or she would recommend. And other forms of help seeking involve asking another person to take action on one's behalf. You can ask someone for advice, or you can actually ask them if they could take action on your behalf. So ladies, to start with, I'd like to ask you a very obvious question. I don't know whether it will come off as obvious, but are you the kind of person who seeks advice? Or are you the kind of person who would love or loves to figure out things on your own?
Well, I'd love to say that much as you think you can always figure things out on your own, there's always going to be that time where you seek advice from someone. Personally, I seek advice, and my favorite person to seek advice from is actually my mother. Like, I love seeking advice from my mother. When I'm in doubt, I'll ring up phone and, tell her, like, this and this and this, what's your advice? What do you recommend? I really think, like, seeking advice is actually one of the ways of actually getting that passive wisdom. You're passively getting the wisdom from someone else. And like you say, no man is an island. You cannot have it all figured out at the end of the day. However, with that being said, I don't like seeking advice from each and everyone. I'm very careful and, very selective when it comes to the people that I seek advice from, because not everyone who's giving you advice is coming from a good place. Yeah, you don't know their perspective. You don't know, you're just taking on someone else's knowledge or understanding of something that you're dealing with personally. So for me, no, I don't seek advice from everyone, but I love to seek advice from a few specific people.
Okay.
Yeah.
Advice. I'm a very inquisitive person and I have a big head. I first want to...
That's a terrible combination.
Yes, somehow it has worked out for me. I like to always first know that I have failed. Of course, there are some situations where you cannot, because there are situations where the moment you have failed for good. But I will say that I am someone who definitely loves to seek advice. And seeking advice, some people would say, is an indicator of maturity, but I absolutely do not think so. But I would say I definitely seek advice. However, I seek advice from one person. Priva mentioned her mom. Me, I seek advice from my father. He's the one person I will always call and say, you know, I have this problem, I need this. How do I go about it? And he will give me the advice. Now, regardless of whether it's in regards to education or a job or relationship advice, he's always the person to go to. You know how we always have categories of people that we go to regardless of what conversation we want to have? For me, it starts with my dad. Then I'll then go to those people who now this person is into relationship advice. They are a counselor. You know, they can help you get a job done. This is the kind of person that I'll talk to. Yes. But when it comes to seeking advice, it's very important that we learn to seek advice and also accept that, you know what, on your own once in a while you will fail. You cannot do it. I mean, we know on our own without God right there is someone that you will seek advice. And actually, something that I forgot to mention, when I first talked about my dad, the very first thing I do every time I want advice about anything is the Bible. The Bible has answers to everything. I love it. We always want to act like the answers are not there, but they're right there. Just open your Bible. You're feeling lonely? Open the Bible. Open Psalms. You're in love? Open Songs of Solomon, you know? All those things are there. Free advice for you.
Okay. Well, for me, I would say that I don't believe that I'm an island. I always seek for advice, not just from my mother. My mother is at the helm, is the first person, my go-to person to ask for advice. And I'll always take about 90% of her advice. However, I do seek advice from even other people, can be workmates, can be friends. Not that I want to actually take their advice. Sometimes I just want to get their opinion on something, on a decision I'm probably about to take, and I just want to know their opinion. I may not take it, but I always ask just to know, get a different perspective from my own. So before we get into the next question that I'd love to ask the ladies, there's a video that I want us to watch, and it's of Muft Menk. I hope that I have pronounced his name right, and he's a motivational speaker, and he always has some good things to say. Let's see what he says about seeking advice.
Assalamu alaikum, my brothers and sisters. When we ask someone for advice and we write our whole story or we narrate the story to them and they give us advice, take it seriously. At least try and see their perspective. Don't seek advice from those whom you are not going to listen to because you've wasted their time. I know of people who involve me sometimes in an arbitration and they expect me to issue a decree or a judgment based on what one side has said, based on what they have said, and that's wrong. I might be able to advise you. So if someone asks me a question, to say, look, I've had a problem with my sister-in-law or whoever else, and it's been stretching for a long time, and this is what happened, and they put it down A, B, C, etc. And then I tell them that, you know what, I cannot give you a judgment because I don't know the other side of the story. But if what you are saying is true, I can guide you, I can advise you. And this advice is based on the fact that you have sent me a mail, and I'm just presuming that if this is true, then this advice is applicable. If it is not accurate, then the advice is not applicable. So there is a difference between advice and a ruling or judgment. So a ruling or judgment cannot be issued unless you've heard all sides and you've given everyone an opportunity to give their input and to say whatever they have to ask them questions and to determine exactly what the truth is. Then you can issue a judgment, a ruling, or a decree. But when it comes to advice, I can advise you based on what you're telling me without having consulted anyone else. And the correctness of that advice would depend on two things: the correctness of the story that you're telling me, firstly, and secondly, the expertise of the person you're asking.
And that is Muft Menk, and is giving his opinion in regard to seeking for advice. So ladies, I'd love to ask you, how would you make a distinction between advice and judgment? Because sometimes you could, confide in someone, tell them, this is what I'm going through. Maybe it can be a relationship, and you are actually seeking for their advice. But how do you make the distinction between, knowing that they're actually advising you or they are judging you for your behavior? Because at the end of the day, when you're seeking for advice, in most cases, you are only giving your side of the story. So they do not know the other side of the story. We are selfish like that as human beings. So how do you make the distinction?
Making the distinction between someone giving you advice and someone judging you Interesting. Okay, so first things first, when someone is judging you, they'll probably make a comment of, how could you? What were you thinking? Especially when it comes to, I'll first talk about relationship advice. What were you thinking? And people like to say, like I said yesterday, the heart wants what it wants. And when it comes to things of the heart, you may not want to get in the middle of them. But when someone makes a comment, how could you? I can't imagine you did this, you know. That is when you know that someone is actually judging you. But when someone is giving you advice, they might even go the extra mile of telling you, you know, I was once in a situation like that, and this is how I handled it. That is actually someone who is giving you advice from a point of love. They're telling you that, hey, guess what? First of all, it is not wrong for you to yes, it might, for example, it's an abortion that you have committed, and you know, the person is saying, yes, you might not have done the right thing, but you're even going the extra mile of saying, I've been through that, this is what happened to me, and this is how I handled it. Making you feel that it doesn't mean that you're less of a human being just because you're going through this situation. So for me, that is how I would be able to tell the difference between judgment and someone giving you advice, because they give it from a point of love.
Okay, Priva Elibas.
I think I'm still trying to, you know, get a hold of the distinction between seeking advice and someone actually judging you. At the end of the day, you know, when you seek advice, I don't think you're asking someone to judge you, yeah? And also even in the delivery, I don't think if you actually go to someone and say, you know what, Shivan, I need some piece of advice about X, Y, Z. You're telling me something coming from a good place. I would want to think it's coming from a good place. So for me, judgment, I almost feel like it has no place in this, like in my understanding, yes, it doesn't have a place in my understanding when it comes to seeking advice. However, I think where we go wrong as people is when we're seeking for guidance, but we end up looking for validation in the long run. You understand? Because you can seek guidance and take people's submissions into consideration, but when you're constantly seeking for validation, it also becomes something else. So I would want to think if you're giving someone advice, you're coming from a good place. Yes.
But don't you think that they'll be biased and maybe end up giving you bad advice? Because if you have not given me the two sides of the story, you're only showing me one side of the coin, then I will give you advice based on what you have told me, right?
Because actually, it takes me back to what you mentioned, or what he mentioned in the video, that sometimes it has skipped my mind.
Sometimes people put forth like they want to involve him in discussions, even when they are not going to act according to what he has told.
That you should seek advice from people that you are ready to take advice from.
Exactly what he said. Because he said at the end of the day, you cannot ask someone for advice when they don't even have an idea about what you're asking them. You know, I cannot come to Aggie and I'm asking for parenting advice when really Aggie doesn't
give you some good parenting advice.
She would, but not from experience. You understand? So it's also more of like, who are you seeking the advice from? That's what matters. Because if you go to someone who has a logical flaw, then you're bound to get wrong advice. Someone might be logically flawed, and you're asking them for advice, but they also don't even know what they're telling you. So.
But also, you see, in relation to what Priva said, and I like that she mentioned it, I think it's very important that we put into consideration the people we ask advice from, because you will ask advice from someone who is going through either a worse situation than what you're going through, and they'll downplay your things and be like, but
they'll give you from their own perspective.
Either they'll give you from their perspective, or they'll downplay your situation and make you feel worse than you already feel.
But then again, with everyone that you ask advice, they are giving you advice from their perspective.
And this is where we go wrong as people, because it's some of the things that we seek advice for from people. There are things that just involve us sitting down as individuals and thinking. Now, Shivan, you're coming to me and you're telling me, you know what, Priva? This guy, this relationship, we've been together for 2 years. You give me all the bad things about this guy, but you're not telling me the good parts. But you know them. You know them at the end of the day. So it's more of like, how am I going to give you my perspective about your own relationship that you've been in for 2 years when you have a better understanding of it than I do? So, yeah.
Okay, let's talk about good and bad advice. How would you know that the advice someone has given me is actually good or it is bad?
Basic knowledge. There's
what is basic knowledge?
Basic knowledge. I mean, if I came to you, Aggie, and I said, there is this person, he's stalking me, I want to kill him, and you told me, go ahead and kill him. Honestly, that is bad advice. It's just common sense. You would know that it's bad advice. It's common sense. But how would you tell good from bad? Is that when someone gives you, how I always tell, is that every single time, first of all, I take advice only from one person. But if I must, if someone tells me something, I look at it and put myself in that situation, that if I did that, would I be comfortable with myself? Would I be able to live with myself? Would I be able to own up in case things went bizarre? If the answer is no, then I would rather not do it.
Not do it.
If the advice is burn down the house, are you ready to live with the consequences? Then burn it down.
But if the house has
she's
demons,
saying.
then you have to
Burn it
actually
down.
burn it down.
Burn it down.
I think for me, to tell good advice and bad advice, like we mentioned from the very get-go, who are you seeking advice from? If, like I mentioned earlier, when I'm going to re-echo this, if they have a logical flaw, and you know,
do you know someone has a logical
flaw,
depending
like
on the advice they've given you in the past?
you see, also we're all always asking for advice and seeking guidance, but deep down we also have an answer to our questions that we're actually asking for. So it's like, yes, you're seeking guidance, but you already know what you want to do. And this is where I think it takes me back to the conversation that we once had about intuition and validation. Sometimes your gut feeling is, is the right thing. It's pushing you to do the right thing, but because you need that validation, to feel like, yes, what you're thinking, someone else has the same, understanding.
Same mindset.
Yes.
There's something that Priva mentioned, and I remember when I was very little, my youth pastor told me about it, and he says, very many times when we go to God and pray, we are praying for something, but we already have a preconceived idea of exactly what you're telling God. God, please show me if this is the right man. But deep down, you're saying,
like, this has
even
to
when
be the
God
man.
has said no, or even wait, you will say green, 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 green. You're telling God, can I go for this job? God has not yet even answered, but for you in your mind, ask me, I want to be on air. I want to be an HR. So which advice are you seeking?
Much as you ask for advice or seek for advice from people, you also need to trust your intuition. That is absolutely, get people's perspectives,
especially
get people's opinions. But even when you go back and sit down, think about what they have told you and trust your intuition. And you have to, I think this is something that people have to learn. I haven't learned it like fully 100%, like to make a distinction between my intuition and paranoia, and all that. But it's something that you need to learn. Now, these are some of the ways, as we wrap up the conversation, how you can put a distinction between good and bad advice. The one of them is understand your state of mind. Now, while receiving any sort of advice, whether it's good or bad, a person needs to clear his or her head before getting into something deeper. Therefore, to avoid such bad influence, a person needs to understand his or her state of mind first before receiving any sort of advice. The other one is listen to your gut feeling, and that is your intuition. Like we were saying earlier, most of the decisions that have been taken from a person doesn't require to be a correct one. It's even possible that the decision taken may turn very badly. Your intuition comes in play. The third one is source of consideration. The factor of considering something of someone's needs to be directed to a source of such consideration. For example, when it comes to receiving advice regarding money matters, a person needs to be sure of such advice before making any stupid mistakes. Ascertain, does this person actually have any financial knowledge, or you're just asking just for just. The other one is based on availability. A most common mistake that a person commits while receiving any kind of advice is that they never check for the availability of such advice. A person who is seeking some good advice may end up choosing bad advice because of its lack of availability. Also, be patient and take your time. It doesn't mean that let's say you want to take advice from your mother and you want to make a quick decision and they are not able to respond maybe to a phone call or a text. Be patient. Do not just move on to getting advice from someone else that you don't trust. You might end up making a decision that you could regret for the rest of your life. Well, that is all we had for you in this segment of Our Views. Connect with us on our socials, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at CTV Uganda. Still talking about advice. Don't blink.
Well, as the saying goes, all good things must come to an end, and it's a very chilly Tuesday morning. So if you're in bed, please pull the covers more. If you do not have to work today, you can pull the covers. If you're at work, you can order online. The world is going digital. You can go online and order your favorite cup of beverage. It could be coffee, it could be chai mukalu, it's okay. It could even be tea and just cassava, something to keep you warm and to keep your stomach full. It is very important that you keep warm at all times, especially during this cold weather. Otherwise, from the ladies and I do hope that you had an amazing time. Keep watching Sunrise at Sea and don't blink. See you next time.